Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm so excited that you're here. Today, we are going to dive in to learn more how to guide your kids to find joy, purpose, and passion in their learning. This means less wasted time at home. This means less negative emotions associated with learning and more positive shared experiences for you and your children. A lot of you are here because you're searching better options for schooling and with your kids. You're attempting homeschooling or unschooling, and you're trying to figure out how to do that to the best of your abilities. We're going to dive in on really how to do this and how to turn learning and creation into a really positive experience for both you and your kids. And so, like I said, I'm guessing the reason that you're here really comes down to this, that the way we're thinking about learning is flawed. And I want to tell you why. If we look at all of our different options, I'm going to shrink this so we can see. We look at our different options here, and we look at unschooling and private schooling on one side. We look at public schooling, charter schools, and private schooling on the other side. And I'm going to make a big statement, a big claim. Are you ready? The statement is that all of these systems are failing you. And that's something big to say. And I myself, I am a product of the public school. I went to public school, K through 12, and then on to college and even graduate school. It's not cutting it. And we're going to talk about more later. Charter schools, a little bit different, cut from the same cloth, not cutting it. I've also worked in public schools. I've worked in charter schools. I've also worked in private schools. We're going to talk about in much more detail why these aren't cutting it for you, but private schools also aren't fitting the bill. Homeschool. I've worked with a lot of homeschool families, and it's falling short for a lot of families. Also, the unschooling methodology falling short for a lot of families. It's not working. And I want to talk to you about why this matters. Why does it matter so much to each of us, to you as parents, to us as a country, to us as citizens of the world? Why should this matter so much to us? Because when we look at how this is impacting people 20 years down the road, let's look at some statistics that should scare all of us. So allaboutcareers.com reports that 44% of college graduates still have, quote, no idea what they want to do with their career. So we're sending kids to a place where for K through 12 and then to college, that's supposed to help them figure out what they want to do with their lives. And upon finishing that whole experience, 44% of them have no idea what they want to do with their career. To put that into perspective for you, that is 1.76 million new floundering 20-something-year-olds that are entering our society every year, still having no idea what they want to do, how they want to spend their time. Deloitte, which is one of our largest research firms in America, found that only 13% of workers are fully passionate about their current job. This statistic is looking at all people, and most of our people are college educated. They're going through like 16 years of schooling, and for what? To realize that they're not even passionate about the thing they're doing, and they feel stuck and they feel aimless. And a lot of you have older kids in their 20s who are experiencing this right now. The Washington Post reported that only 27% of college grads work in a field that are closely related to their major. So just a quick review, 44% of people finish college, they have no idea what they're doing. Only 13% of people find themselves with jobs that they actually feel passionate about. And only 27% of college grads work in majors or in jobs, that are closely related to their major. We see that we have so many 20-something-year-olds, and that extends, I believe, to 30, 40, 50-something-year-olds who are aimless, who don't enjoy the way they're spending their time, and aren't finding fulfillment in what they're doing. Now, the SHRM, which is a nationwide HR association, reported that the top missing skills among young hires are problem solving, critical thinking, innovation, and creativity. We're going to really dive into why this matters and why we should all care deeply about this. But most of our workforce is not passionate about what they're doing. And almost half of our college graduates end college having no idea what they want to do with their lives. And most of our college graduates don't know how to solve problems. They aren't equipped with critical thinking skills. They're not innovative, and they're not creative. Let's look at why this matters, because you should be feeling like this, That should be terrifying to you. It should be a major wake-up call. And if that's not scary enough, check this out. McKinsey reports that 16 to 54 million American jobs will be replaced by AI in 2030. That is just 8 years away. So if most of our jobs are being replaced by AI, let's talk about why. Because AI is far better at taking in information, making calculations, and spitting out an output. And so all of the jobs that require people to receive information and create an output will be replaced by AI. We're not just talking about cash registers or McDonald's workers. We're talking about accountants. We're talking about lawyers. We're even talking about doctors and doctors' assistants, right? People, things that are able to receive information and make decisions. Computers are much more accurate than humans in this way. And so we're seeing all of these jobs being replaced. Now, this means that many of our grade schoolers will work in jobs that don't currently exist. Once again, what happens to young people if they finish college? Again, they're aimless. They don't know what they're going to do. And if they don't have the skill set of critical thinking, innovation, creativity, and problem solving, what are they going to do? Because they can't compete with AI. AI is taking all the jobs that are just mindless assembly line jobs. And so what are those kids going to do? Let me tell you, it's scary and the data is bad. So we looked at each of these 5 options, but I just want to say this before we proceed, that they are not necessarily the bad guy. I'm not pointing a finger at the teachers in the public schools. In fact, I have a lot of friends and I myself have worked in those situations, and they're amazing people who are fighting for their lives to change the lives of young people. The parents in homeschools, they're not the bad guys. In fact, I applaud you. I think you're doing amazing things, and stepping up to a system and saying, we're going to do it on our own at home is incredibly brave. And a lot of you are doing amazing things. Charter schools, private schools, unschoolers, you're not the bad guys. But let me tell you is that it's still not perfect and it's still wrong. And why is it wrong? It's wrong because of 2 things. It's wrong because you're missing the mark on metric and process. First, we're going to talk about metric a little bit. We're going to dive in here. So the metric, first, we're going to look at the public schools, charter schools, and private schools on this side of the equation. This is where we're dropping our kids off at different locations, and they are using this metric and this process. Are we ready? So the metric that's used in the vast majority of these locations is we slide out A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. And this is how our children know if they're succeeding at these locations. And let me tell you a few of the outcomes of this metric, and you've seen it with your own kids. And so you know this is true. We have our first group of kids who catch on pretty quick that this metric actually doesn't matter, that this metric isn't connected to the real world. And so they get apathetic and they get C's and D's and F's on their report card, and they get F's on their paper, and their response would be, well, who cares? I didn't want to write the paper anyway. And can you tell me why the paper mattered? And us adults, we come up with some response of, well, it's important for your future. And they can't see why it's connected to their future. And so they become apathetic. And this is really damaging because it also means they don't care. They think they don't care about learning because the only association for them of learning is their schooling, which is using a broken metric. And so they're apathetic about all learning. There's the next group who attaches their self-worth to the grades. And so this, on an outward perspective, might be awesome. It might look awesome that, like, wow, these kids are getting straight A's. What's really happening is they become experts at following orders. They become experts at doing what they're told, and they lose the capacity, or at least they don't practice having the capacity of identifying problems and opportunities, creating their own plans and adapting, right? All they're doing is following orders. Then there's a third group who they want to get A's. They want to get straight A's. They're not apathetic, right? They're not in the first group and that they actually care, but they're not in the second group in that it doesn't come as naturally to them. They really struggle. And so they get B's, C's, and D's, and their whole self-worth is damaged because why? I mean, they want to be better. and they just can't figure it out, and they're not smart enough. And so all of a sudden they start to feel like a failure, and they start to feel like they're not good enough and like they're a misfit. A lot of times it's like we're asking fish to climb trees. It's just we're asking them to do things that don't quite matter, and it's damaging our kids. Next, let's talk about the process used in these schools. So we use a bell, and we change kids from room to room to room. This process, by the way, was created. We're not going to do a vast history lesson here. You can go in and look it up. But this system was created to output children that wouldn't question authority, and they would follow their orders and do what they were told. And so we move them from class to class. We tell them to sit down in a desk in neat rows, and they're told to be quiet, to sit down, and to do what they're told, to write the paper, to fill out the worksheet, whatever. So this is the process that's used. We treat learning in these locations as if a teacher can just pour knowledge into the brain of a child. We know that this is not how learning works. Learning only works when it's self-motivated, when the learner wants to learn. The reason that those two things, there are two ways that a learner will be motivated and actually desire learning. That's if it's based on necessity. So you think about it, your own house, when the pipe breaks underneath the sink, you will learn how to replace a pipe because you have to. Otherwise, there will be a lot of water damage, and that's the worst. Either that or you'll pay a plumber. But that is an example of necessity, that you have to learn something. Kids don't understand that. Kids don't have enough experience in the world to understand why learning 4 + 4 is necessary for them. The other motivation for learning comes because of fun, because we love it, because we're passionate about it. This is the way that we need to deliver our learning for kids, and it's not happening in this version of schooling. Again, we treat it as if we can just pour it in, and then we expect them to regurgitate it on a test. Now, tests can only measure certain things, and it's not a good metric to see if kids are actually growing. The only thing it's doing is identifying if kids can listen and regurgitate something, which they forget, by the way, in less than 2 weeks. That's all that a test is able to measure. It's not a very good measuring stick of the growth of kids, the development of kids. It's just trying to see, can you regurgitate something that you were told 2 weeks ago? And by the way, we actually don't care if you're going to forget it in 2 weeks. And by the way, it's not preparing our kids for the real world. And so what's the point anyway, right? And so this is the current process that's being used. So we have a metric and a process that's largely broken. And so a lot of you actually watching this have already experienced that, and you have felt that deeply, and you've chosen to go a different route, and you've chosen homeschooling or unschooling. And the metric and the process here, well, you guys, we have to ask a question, because a lot of times we have question marks here. And we pull them out of the structure that we're all familiar with in the drop-off models, and we don't have a metric anymore, and we don't have a process anymore. I want to applaud a lot of the parents out there that are actually doing really great things, that are making amazing strides and amazing progress with their kids. I associate with families and with moms and dads whose kids are making incredible progress and finding their passion, and I applaud you. For a lot of individuals, that's not true. You find yourself in a situation where you're flailing. You might have kids that are bored. You might have kids that aren't being challenged, or you have kids who are unmotivated, who are uncaring. And this is because we're not using the correct metric, and we're not using the correct process. Okay. As a result, again, flashing back to this, as a result, most of our college graduates have no idea what they want to do with their lives. That's 1.76 million floundering 20-something-year-olds, 13% of workers who are not passionate about what they're doing, 27% college grads who pick a major but are actually working with it, right? That leaves 73% who aren't doing what they studied in school. Again, this results in people who don't know how to problem solve, who aren't critical thinkers, who lack innovation and lack creativity. What this really comes down to is this comes down to our kids between the ages of 10 and as old as 60 who can't find purpose in what they're doing, it's difficult for them to find joy, because again, without purpose, where does your joy come from? And they lack passion in what they're doing. Remember, only 13% of workers say they're passionate about their current role. So if we're buying into a system that's lacking purpose, joy, and passion, that is a difficult reality. And it's a reality that I don't want to accept. So all of this should make us wonder, how in the world can we set our kids up for success? A lot of people have tried to solve the problem. And there are good people in both the public school, charter school, private school, and on the other side of homeschool and unschooling who are working on solving this problem, right? Public schools say, yay, we know the answer, more desk time. We'll prepare them more. We'll have more tests. On average around our country over the last 20 years, schools are spending less time at recess because they're doing test prep. For those of you who've done a lot of reading, this is really damaging for our kids because kids learn best through play, and they learn how to associate with other people, and they become socialized through recess, through play, through interacting with their peers. So we're spending a lot more time with test prep, which again, isn't preparing kids for the real world, and less time on recess. This has resulted in kids who hate learning, right? Because their only experience with learning is going to school, and they're miserable at school. Kids who are bored. A lot of you have kids who are so bright and so intelligent, and they're stuck sitting in a class being prepared for a test, and they're bored out of their mind. Kids who feel dumb. Again, these are kids who wish they were getting A's, and they can't figure out how to do it, and so they feel dumb, and they feel like they're not good enough. It creates kids, you guys, who are scared of failure. So you've seen this in your own kids, and it's a tragedy, right? We're trying to develop kids who have a growth mindset, and instead we're putting them in a system that has them terrified of making a mistake. And a mistake is the worst thing that could happen because they're getting points, they're filling in the wrong bubble, and they're getting things wrong on their test. And so they're petrified of making a mistake. We should be encouraging kids to take risks and take mistakes because this is how they learn, and this is how they develop a growth mindset. Our system is not doing this. You guys, we're creating kids, we're outcoming kids who have their creativity smothered, again, because we're just preparing them to take a test. We're just preparing them to regurgitate what they're told. We're not helping them identify opportunities, create plans, acting according to their plans, or adapt, right? We're not helping them learn how to do any of this. Now, charter schools make heroic efforts, but are still bound by standardized tests. I've taught at charter schools. I sit on the board of directors at a charter school, and the hands are tied, right? We want to do so many great things. We write really beautiful charters and mission statements, but at the end of the day, we still have to prepare kids for their tests. Otherwise, we lose our funding. And so our hands are still tied. We're bound by that. Private schools can do a great job. And I worked at a private school for 2 years, an Acton Academy model that's doing amazing things. Genuinely, I loved it. And it's doing amazing things for the kids. And it also costs as much as a college tuition. And compared to some colleges, it actually costs more than college tuition. And that just isn't a solution for a lot of families. Now, on the other side of the fence, we have homeschooling and unschooling. Homeschooling and unschooling, they're making great strides. And I've seen families who are doing amazing things. And I've met 12-year-olds who they'll blow your mind because of what they're doing and what they're creating and the way that they're learning. But a lot of these families are craving social interaction, and they're missing out on a structure that helps them be confident in the fact that my child is actually growing and they're actually developing. Great resources have popped up over the last few years to help support and help us learn about this, right? I'm not the first one to talk about our need for educational reform. There's a whole bunch of great resources, and honestly, I'd recommend that you read all of them. If you're watching this, I'm guessing that you have read a lot of them. Here's the difficult part. The difficult thing is finding programs who actually implement the research. And it's not because people are unintelligent. It's because it's really hard. It's really difficult to implement the research. The reason is because we're working with humans. We're working with people who are different, and they're all unique, and we put them all in the same room, which means that it's really messy. Learning is messy, and it's really hard. And so implementing this research on a theoretical level, it sounds beautiful and it makes so much sense and it rings true to so many of us. And then we try and implement it, and it's messy. And that can be terrifying, especially when you're working with your own kids. So I have worked at each and every one of these locations. I've talked I've worked with parents in each of these situations. And I want to tell you a little bit about what my journey has looked like and how I found out all that I've learned and how it's helped me come up with a metric and a process that actually works. So 7 years ago, I went to graduate school, and I went to graduate school with one goal in mind, and it was to help figure out how on earth can I come up with a program, come up with a solution that helps kids find purpose, passion, and joy in their lives. And I wanted so badly to be able to help kids do that. And so I went in and I started, after graduate school, I started teaching in-school courses to kids. I was entering into private schools and charter schools, and it was actually really amazing. And we were starting businesses inside of the school, and it was really amazing. But at the end of the day, I was frustrated because at those locations, the head of schools and the principals would rather me prepare the kids for a test than help them gain real world experience by making more money and selling things inside the school. And so I had to get out of that situation. So after just 2 years there, I left and I started a few e-commerce businesses, and I found a lot of joy and a lot of purpose doing that. And it was so amazing for me to think of something in my head and to hold it in my hand. And it was valuable enough that other people would buy it from me. That was awesome. And it was so cool. And I loved it, but I really wanted to get back and help the young kids again to find purpose and passion and joy in their lives. And so I knew that it had something to do with this aspect of creation. And so I went back and I met an individual who helped me get involved with the Acton Academy model of school. And I worked there for 2 years, and it was incredible. I worked there, and my role was a leadership role. And so I helped kids learn how to view learning in a different way and to take control of their own learning and be accountable. And this was amazing to watch kids find purpose in the things they were creating. But again, it was a private school. And so the tuition was so expensive that this just wasn't an option that would be widespread available for a lot of families. Next, I jumped onto a board of directors at a charter school, and the charter at this school is incredible. And it's all about self-directed learning and Montessori principles and entrepreneurship development and self-directed learning. And at the end of the day, though, it's so frustrating because as we try to push towards self-directed learning and we try to push to passion-driven learning, the state comes down on us, and we continually have to prepare these kids for tests and spend more time on test prep, which is so frustrating because it limits the freedom of the teachers, and it limits the freedom and the passion-driven model that could be impacting the kids, right? And this has led me, each one of these steps has prepared me and led me to identifying and creating what I call the creator's path, metric, and process. There's a better way. There's a better way to help our kids learn how to identify needs in the world or opportunities, to create plans and then act accordingly and learn and adapt based on what they're seeing. Now, when we use this, you guys, we have the correct metric and the correct process in place. This metric and process works, and I can't wait to tell you more about it. But first, let me tell you why this matters so much to me. I had an experience that changed the trajectory of my life. This was about 7 years ago. It's what sent me into graduate school. And this experience really begins when I was just a kid. I was 8 years old, and I saw one of my very best friends. He moved away, and I was so sad. I was so sad to lose my friend. And when he came back just a few years later, I was so excited, and I thought I was going to have my friend back. But it turns out that he had made some choices that sent him on a different life trajectory than me. And it was surprising to me as I observed him, right, as a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old, and looking back and realizing that, wow, like the choices that he made are really impacting him. The choices that he made as a little kid are impacting him. And so sometimes we look at the school system, we look at the things that we're putting our kids through at just 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, or as teenagers, and we think that it can't matter that much, right? They're just kids. The choices that our 8 and 10 and 12 and 11-year-olds are making impact them for the rest of their lives. And I remember I was sitting in college, and I was sitting at a conference, and I was reflecting. I was a 24-year-old, and I was reflecting on my friend, and where he was at 24 and where I was at 24 was very different, very, very different. And it all came down to the choices that he made as a 10-year-old kid. And that to me frustrated me, and it blew my mind. And I was sitting there in this business conference, and one of the speakers was talking about how she left companies like Apple and Amazon to create organizations that created impact in the world. And she has created organizations that would help lepers in India. And she has created organizations and worked with different groups that create tons of value. And I was listening to her, and it occurred to me for the first time in my life that I could do something that mattered in the world, and that I could do something that I cared about and that I was passionate about. Now, we saw those statistics before, and I am a perfect example, right? I'm a 24-year-old, and it had never occurred to me that I could do something with my time and with my life that mattered to me, that I cared about, that I was passionate about, and that I could do it in an excellent enough way that people would pay me for it. And I decided right then and there that I was going to jump in, and that I was going to create something that would help kids to find purpose, passion, and joy in their lives, and to make choices and to have a skill set at 12 years old that would equip them for their future to live the best possible life for themselves. Okay. So the metric and the process, that's what it all comes down to, the creation metric. And where it begins is curiosity. It all begins with curiosity. We've all seen small children who will build up a tower just to knock it over. It almost brings them more joy to knock the tower over than to make it, right? This all comes down to curiosity. They're so curious about what will happen that it moves them to create. We experience this as well as adults. We get curious about how something works or how it would look if we did it, and it moves us to action. After we're curious, we begin to enter a phase where we create for ourselves. We create because it makes our lives better. This might be as simple as making your bed in the morning, right? If you're married, that impacts someone else. But as a single person, you make your bed just because it makes your life better. You might paint a painting, and that's a beautiful demonstration of creation, but you have no intention of selling it. You have no intention of getting it out there, but it's making your life better. It means something to you. That's the very first level after curiosity. Next, we move to value creation, where we realize that at some level of creation, we can actually create something that's valuable to someone else. And so for our own needs, right? We need money. We need to sustain ourselves. We might begin creating value for other people. So this looks like getting a job, and we create value in the workplace, or we begin, maybe we're painting and we get skilled enough at painting that we can start to sell our paintings, and we're creating value for other people. Now, the ultimate tier in this creation metric actually comes with fulfillment. The fulfillment creation metric is all defined by the fact that you begin creating on an elevated scale, where you actually create out of a deeper motivation to serve other people. So each of these actually can mean you're creating the same thing, but your motive changes drastically. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Our goal is to help kids climb this creation metric, to go from curiosity to begin creating for themselves, then begin creating value for other people, and then begin creating the motive for other people. Okay. Now, we're going to understand this a lot better as we begin to look at the process, because the process is a 6-step process that actually helps us elevate up each level of that ladder. We go from curiosity and we walk the process, and that helps us get to personal creation. We walk the process, and that helps us get to value creation. We walk the process again, and it helps us get in fulfillment. And we walk the process again and again and again as we grow and we expand. Now, the creation process has 6 steps, and those steps are check in. We check in on where we are and where we want to be and what we want to create. Next, we round up. We round up our resources. We identify what we need, what are connections we need, what's knowledge that I'm lacking that I need to grow in order to accomplish this goal. Next, I emerge. This means that I come out of darkness into the light, and I begin to talk to people about what it is that I'm creating. I'm not bashful. I don't keep it to myself. I get loud about what I'm creating, and I start to show it to the world. Next, I act. I begin to act upon my plan that I've been talking about. Fifth, we test it out. You act, and very quickly you begin to test it in the world, and you make pivots and you shift and you adjust, which leads us to step 6. You evolve. You evolve in what you're creating, which leads us back to check in, because after this process, we get to a point where we say, okay, where are we now and where do we need to be again? Because at this point, I can look to the future and see where I need to go from here. So what this looks like in practice is first we get curious, we walk through the process, leads us to personal creation. We walk through the process, leads us to value creation, walk through the process, which leads us to fulfillment creation. And we continue to walk that process. I want to walk through really quickly what the creation metric looks like with the creation process and how those two work together. And we're going to use the example of, let's say you get curious because your home is just cluttered and you need more storage space. So you begin to get curious about how you could make that happen. And you start thinking about, okay, I could do shelves. I could add something to my garage. I could add more organization, maybe get some of those plastic bins. And you come up with this idea that, okay, I'm going to build a shed. So what's happening with that curiosity creation is at that base level, first you're checking in, you're saying, I need more order. I'm unorganized now and I want to be more orderly. And so you begin to round up, you begin to gather information. And so you're saying, how could I do this? And that's when you start to ideate the different ways that you could do it. Then you begin to emerge from darkness. You talk to your spouse about it. You talk to your kids about it. What do they want to do? Do they want shelves? Do they want plastic bins? Do they want to do a shed? And then you begin to act, right? You begin to act on the plan, which might look like, okay, if I'm going to do a shed, I should probably learn how to do the shed. So you're going to watch some videos. You might go buy a hammer. You might do different things. You're going to test, meaning you're going to, okay, do I want this model? And what would it look like? I'm going to make measurements in the backyard and I'm going to try and figure out if it really makes sense for me to do a shed in the backyard. I'm going to act and test, going back and forth. And then I'm going to evolve, which hopefully at this stage in the game looks like, okay, I was curious about what it would look like to add more storage to my house. I went through this process that led me to mapping out that I want a shed and here's what my shed's going to look like. So I've evolved, right? I've gone from wanting to create more storage to actually having a plan with a set blueprint for what I want to do. And I'm doing that because it's going to add value to me. And in this case, it would add value to my family, right? But personal creation, you're creating this because it would add value to you and your life. And so at this point, you recheck in and you say, okay, well, I'm going to build a shed according to the dimensions that I just mapped out. So I check in, what do I need? I might need a bunch of 2x4s. I'm going to need siding. I'm going to need insulation. I'm going to need shelving, cement, yada, yada, yada. You get the idea. And so you check in, you round up, what do you need? We check, we got all the stuff, right? Next, emerge. And so we get all the stuff in the backyard and we look through our plans, we look it over and we begin to act. We get going. And as we act and we're nailing and we're going, we want to test frequently, right? As our foundation firm, are the shelves where we want them to be? We might learn halfway through that, oh no, we actually like it this way or that way better. And we test and we build and we test and we build. And we get to a point where we finished our shed and we as people have evolved and our creation has evolved, right? But we get to a point where all of a sudden we recognize that we are capable of creating this type of value. And so let's say that we talk to our neighbors and we show them pictures and we say, hey, this created a lot of personal value for me. It might create a lot of value for you as well. I could help you create or build this shed in your backyard. And boom, we start to walk through the cycle one more time. And you can see how this is one level more valuable than personal creation because we start to create value for other people. This is the whole goal of the metric ladder, right? First, we create because we're curious. Then we create because it adds value to our lives. Next, we start creating because it adds value to their lives, okay? And last is fulfillment creation. Once we get to this stage, we begin creating not because we want to sustain ourselves or because we need to be paid, but we begin to create out of love. And we begin to create because other people have needs and there's opportunities to serve those people. And we begin to create because we see those needs and we're able to fill them. This is how the metric works with the process. We walk through that process over and over and over again as we climb the creation metric ladder. So this is how those two work together. And you guys, it's an incredible metric, an incredible process that works. When we use the creation metric and process, kids and teens develop the ability to first identify opportunities and needs, second, to craft plans, third, to act on their plans, and fourth, adapt according to their creative instincts. And they learn to do this over and over and over again. It becomes second nature to them. Remember that in contrast, a lot of kids are learning how to hear information and regurgitate it. Kids who work according to this metric and this process learn how to identify opportunities, craft plans, act on their plans, and then adapt according to their creative instincts. The creator's metric and process result in learning breakthroughs. Kids take control of their own learning, create things they care about, and learn how to create value for other people, all while curating experiences for your whole family. This is the metric and process that makes it all work, okay? And the best part is that anyone can do this. Anyone. I want to introduce you to a few people. So meet the club member who found confidence through a board game. This incredible young man joined us, and week after week in our meetups, he was creating a board game, and he would come and he would create and he would act and test, and he would test out his game. And so the kids who were testing it out with him gave him feedback, and he learned and he grew and he built beautiful things. And so what he was doing is he was going from personal creation to value creation. He created a game because it was fun to him. And then he was starting to learn on how he can create a game that was fun enough that it was valuable to other people and that it added value to their lives. Now, this individual, he got second place in our Shark Tank competition the year that he participated. And his mom came up to me and she said, you know, the best thing, even more than the money and even more than getting second place in the Shark Tank, the best thing has been him finding confidence through the program. And the reason that he found confidence is because he began to create value for other people. And other people began to value him, because we all love people who create fun for us and create experiences for us, right? That can happen for your kids. He is just like your kids. Meet another individual. He found financial success through bow ties. And so he eventually, after walking this creative metric, he started to create bow ties. So he had them manufactured overseas, and what started with bow ties then led to watches and rings and bracelets and necklaces. And he started this business, and this year, 2022, he's projected to bring in $65,000, right? And so for him, he's hanging out in that value creation realm where he has learned how to create value for other people successfully enough that he's starting to push a lot of money and move a lot of money around. I can tell you that he has walked this creative process over and over and over again to get to the place where he is now. And that's where real learning happens. Another who learned how to take advantage of resources thanks to a rock. So with some of our club members, we do an experience where we start them off with a rock, just an ordinary rock, and they go out to play bigger or better. And after making trades and trades and trades with their neighbors, they start to get things that are a lot more valuable, right? One of the most amazing things I've seen is a young lady who traded and traded, and eventually she got to a motorcycle trailer, a big old trailer that you can pull behind your car. And she couldn't drive at the time, so that was no value to her, but she posted that online for trades. And at the time, her parents wanted to have a cement pad in her backyard, and she ended up trading that motorcycle trailer for a cement pad that was valued at $10,000. That took her 1 week, and she went from a rock, zero value, to a cement pad, $10,000 value. So she was really hanging out the value creation, but I really wanted to point out that she took the step up to fulfillment creation. So for her, a cement pad didn't matter to her, right? That mattered to her parents. And so she identified needs of her parents, and she fulfilled that need through a motorcycle trailer that she got from a rock a few days before. She was walking that creative path. She was checking in, rounding up, emerging, acting, testing, and evolving to a point where she was able to identify opportunities and needs, act, and then adapt. Beautiful, beautiful example. And you guys, there are so many more examples of kids who are doing amazing things and who are walking this creative process and metric, and they're finding purpose and meaning in their lives and finding joy because they're creating value for other people. And this is exactly what we want to do for your kids as well. Now, one last person I want to introduce you to, this is Melissa. Melissa's son went through the program a few years ago, and her son was creating a board game. He ended up not seeing it through, but Melissa, just a few months later, ended up creating a game herself. So Melissa was an individual who she had created tons of value in her home, right? She'd created different circumstances. She'd created beautiful meals. She'd created gatherings. And she decided that she would create a card game that would add value to families outside of just her own. And this card game is so beautiful. It's called Emotion Commotion, and it helps kids and parents learn how to talk about emotions and how to express emotions, which is so important in our day and age. And so I just think it's an amazing example of a parent who, for the first time as an adult, chose to create value in such a way, and she walked that creative process. This is so beautiful because kids and parents can do it together. Learning isn't just for kids, and learning isn't just for adults. It's a process that is true and a metric that is true, and it will work if you're 3, if you're 33 or 93. Walking the path and the process works. When we level up in the metric by walking the process, again, we learn how to create value for other people, for other people. We begin to be selfless and look outward and create for them. At this point, you have a decision to make. First, to go on your own, which means to continue in public school, charter school, or private school, where they're using this metric and this process, which we've talked about the ills of this metric and process that can be really damaging to our kids. Or you have the choice to stay in homeschooling, stay in unschooling, which has a lot of question marks as far as what metric and what process are being used. Or you can choose to join us, and you can join to one of our experiences, and where you're going to find the creative metric and the creative process. We help kids and teens walk the creator's path through online club experiences. For kids, we have a beautiful experience called the Creativity Club. The Creativity Club will help your kids spark their creativity, engage in weekly challenges, and win rewards. When you join, you get access to an online community. What that online community looks like is a Facebook group where families and kids are sharing what they're creating and how they're growing. And as they go, right, all of these kids are participating in the same challenges week after week after week. So they're able to see these different challenges that are being performed by kids in different states and across town. And it's really, really motivating for these kids to be able to also participate and create beautiful things. That will also give you Socratic method trainings. It's so important in this process that we learn how to talk to our kids in a way that helps them become the decision makers and them to become people who think for themselves. So we're going to deliver you some Socratic discussion trainings. Next, an at-home guidebook. And so this process is so beautiful because you have online support, but we're also going to give you the resources you need it to facilitate it in your own home. So facilitate it in your own home, join us online, but we're all going to be doing the same process together. And it's so beautiful. Next, 12 weeks of weekly activities. So those activities are exciting and they're challenging and they're fun. And again, you're going to be able to facilitate them in your home at the same time as other families around the country are also facilitating those same activities. Next, 12 weeks of challenges and rewards. Same thing. You're going to be able to deliver these at the same time as families around the country, and they're fun and they get kids out of their comfort zone and they're going to have a great time. So the other thing that you're going to get is weekly accountability. And so one of the most crucial things that I talk about with parents is a lot of your kids, they know this stuff. They know and even enjoy creation, but having someone else tell them outside of their parents is actually really helpful. And so having a place where they can go week after week to be held accountable, and not only to a different adult, but to other kids around the country, is insanely valuable for them. And this is what that accountability looks like with meetups and with the Facebook group. Next, we're actually going to send you a creativity supply box. So all of the supplies that you need to create an amazing experience and to do the challenges with your kids, we're going to send it to you. This is the way that we get kids from 8 to 12 on this creation metric and on the process. We give them challenges that are fun and they're gamified, and every week helps them to walk through this process of checking in, rounding up, emerging, acting, testing, and evolving. Next up, you guys, we have the club for our teenagers, and the club for the teenagers is the Teen Startup Club. What you get with this, it's going to look really similar at the beginning. Both of our clubs have amazing resources. Once again, you're going to get an online community. You're also going to get those Socratic discussion trainings. You're also going to get an at-home guidebook. You're also going to get 12 weeks of activities that look a little bit different for the older kids, right? for our teenagers. You're also going to get 12 weeks of challenges, which look a lot different for our teenagers, really getting them outside of their comfort zone. And at this point, they're really making a lot of money. It's really awesome. We also have built-in accountability. Here's where things start to get really different. We have built in for the Teen Startup Club where they can launch a crowdfunding campaign. So on our platform of kidstarter.club, you can go in and see the different campaigns that are rolling. One of our campaigns right now is the phone pop filter. There's a 16-year-old who has created this. You can go and you can see his page. He's doing amazing things, right? And so your kids will get access to the same platform. Next up, we have access to our Shark Tank competition. The Shark Tank competition is an absolute blast. We pit our teens against each other, pitching on stage in front of a large crowd. They can participate online or in person. They participate in front of live judges, and real money is on the line. And it is a huge blast to be a part of. And the energy in there is electric. You're going to absolutely love it. The goal of this club is to help our teenagers begin to learn value creation and fulfillment creation. With the Creativity Club, we start lower. We start with curiosity and personal creation. As we move up to the older ages, value and fulfillment. We're helping them walk that process. And as they get older, we're helping them to add value more and more and more to the lives of other people. These clubs work for kids who are bored. I've worked with a lot of kids who are bored in traditional education. Kids who are naturally entrepreneurs, it's going to really work for them. It's going to work for the overachievers, people who are kind of, they're not getting enough of a challenge at school. It's going to work with kids who have ADHD. I've worked with a lot of kids who are really fidgety, and it's really, really difficult for them to focus in a traditional school setting, especially because they don't care about what's being taught. It works because watch what happens to your kids with ADHD when they actually get to choose what they create, and it's beautiful. Kids with special needs. So a lot of these kids with special needs are overwhelmed when it comes to learning and academics. This experience works for them because it's self-paced and self-directed, and they're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Our clubs work for all of these kids because we're using the creation metric and the creation process that helps kids learn how to identify needs, act on their plans that they make, and then adapt according to their creative instincts. Both of these clubs are available for only $247, and you get all of this. So you get the weekly challenges, you get rewards, you're going to get the accountability built into online community. You're going to get the supply boxes, you're going to get the crowdfunding campaigns and the Shark Tank competitions. For only $247, we're going to get your kids started on the creator's path. The next session starts February 2022. We want to help your kids find purpose, joy, and passion in their lives. The trend right now in America, like we talked about before, are college graduates who have no idea what they're doing with their lives. The trend right now is that AI is taking jobs of people who don't know how to think for themselves. We want to help your kids think for themselves, to become creative and innovative, to identify opportunities and needs, to create plans, act on plans, and then adapt according to what they observe. We want to help your kids become experts in walking this process so that they can level up the metric and begin to feel fulfillment where they're creating for other people with the motive of love and generosity and outward thinking. Join us today, you guys, and watch what happens. It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much. We'll see ya.